talking about. And is 2 months enough? I see this sometimes. I see some of you sending out surveys right away and then not getting good responses or saying, no, I don't have a job yet. I just passed NCLEX, I'm still looking, or whatever. I've just graduated with my nurse educator MSN, and I'm trying to get that first teaching position. I don't have it yet. So when we assess it is important. You want to be reasonable and realistic. Is it okay to collect job placement data at the time of graduation? You know, they're walking off stage and going, did you get a job? Are we allowed to do that? No. I mean, feel free if you want to collect that data, but that's not the data that should go in your systematic plan for 5.4, because that's not them working as a nurse or working as an FNP, all right? That's just a promise of a job, okay? Doesn't count. Job assessments, job employment assessment occurs after, post-graduation, and do it in a timely way that makes the most sense for when you think they would actually have a job. All right, because this should sound familiar, again, we're collecting our data, we're analyzing our data. Now here is a little bit of a different point than we've seen in the other program outcomes. We are analyzing the sufficiency of the data that we get, because as this lady pointed out, sometimes it's hard to get them to submit those surveys back to us. We know this, but we have to assess. We can't just go, oh, well, they didn't send it back and we don't care. No. We have to figure out by maybe using multiple methods that we have enough data that we can feel good about what the actual job placement rate is when we analyze that rate. So this is a different sub-criterion that we don't see in the others that we need to address. Another reason why we ask you to write narrative to each sub-criterion, because this one is missed a lot. And so by ensuring that you are addressing each of the sub-criterion, you will not miss an opportunity to answer the question about, are your data sufficient and how do you know that? Or what have you done to improve the sufficiency of your data? So that is a big difference in 5.4 that we do not see in the other criteria. Otherwise, we're analyzing our data, we're documenting our data, we're sharing the data with others. I mentioned this already, but the program should attempt to contact all graduates, and again, the job placement rate is based on the people we contact, not the total number of graduates. We look at the last 3 years of data, unless you are a new program or a program that is in candidacy. What does it look like? Like all the others. Systematic plan that has that plan built out, and then our data are here. This is in your handout too to make it a little easier to read. Let's see, this is plans on page 31, data is on page 32. And you can see here, we have program response rates that are running 45%, 52%, 83%. Wow. They clearly were not happy with the 45% and must have done something to improve that response rate. Now, I'm here to tell you that your Board of Commissioners are reasonable people. They come from programs just like yours. They understand you are not going to get a hold of everybody. Having the N here is helpful. You can see we have the raw data here to look at for context. They don't tend to get really bothered until they see response rates dropping below 30%. That is going to be based on your particular situation. If you have a cohort of 10 and you only hear from 3 of them and you're in a small community where everybody stays in the community, we're going to expect that you probably got a hold of everybody. So we're going to put that in context. But in general, our goal is 30% or more. So this program has gone above and beyond with their response rates. And then you can see their actual placement rates are very high, very high. Question?
Do you need to list how you contact them in that response rate? So do you need to say I contacted 10 of them through the survey, 15 through Facebook, 3 because I met them in the hallway, 2 because they emailed me, like...
One of them had a TikTok video.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. You do not need to keep track of that unless you want to. You just need to keep track that you got a hold of them, and again, making sure we're not duplicating head count. So yes, you observed them, but did they also fill out a survey? We only want to count that once, right? So, but no, we don't look into that. But I would say that in your narrative for 5.4, when it talks about how you assess your students' job placement, you would talk about all the different ways in which you've collected that data. Say we observe them, we have surveys, we have follow-up phone calls, a few of them we text. But no, you don't need to keep track of that. In that handout on those pages I just listed, you can see how, once again, there is an annual documentation of the analysis of the data. You will see in that narrative that this program did work on improving their response rates, and it worked, right? So they analyzed the data. The problem wasn't with the job placement rate. The problem was, hey, we just want to make sure we get more data. We want to make sure that this is as good as we think it is. And they worked hard on it, and they actually made significant improvements. So we just talked about what you would see in the narrative. Same thing, write your narrative, use those focus questions. The one here says, does the SPE have a plan that includes the assessment methods, the ELA? Like collection intervals. When I read your narrative, does that answer those questions for me? And then I look at your systematic plan, and that's what I see you've been doing over the last 3 years. Your narrative is going to talk about where you document it. Is it in the SPE? Is it in meeting minutes? Is it in program reports? You'll have an opportunity in the narrative to talk about how you share the analysis of this data with your communities of interest. So that's the self-study report part of it. The writing of the narrative is easy if you're doing the work, because you know how it's been done for your systematic plan. You always have the option of doing other program outcomes. We do not require any more than the 3 that we talked about this morning. Okay? So if you want to, you can elect to do satisfaction surveys. Now, I will say for those of you that have graduate programs that have APRN options for the NTF task force, you do have to continue to do graduate satisfaction surveys for those NTF standards. But that is not required for anybody else, any non-APRN or undergraduate programs. But if you elect to send out satisfaction surveys for your students and collect that data, feel free. We talked a lot about ultimate pass rates, ultimate completion rates. You might want to track that in your systematic plan. You don't have to. You might want to, especially if you're having pass rate issues. Or if your program completion rate data on time don't look that great, you might want to include your ultimate. It's not required. You might have a state board of nursing or your governing organization that requires you to collect other data on other outcomes. It's fine to put it in there. But the only 3 are the ones that we talked about. And on that note, for your CE, you can take a minute to reflect on what we've talked about, and we have about 5 minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, anything that's giving them anxiety or heartburn, and you want to come up to the microphone, we've got about 5 minutes for questions.
Good morning. So I wanted to comment to the young ladies who wanted to know about finding students and tracking data. My school pays for a mountain measure from NCSBN, and I think it's money well spent because you get to find out exactly who passed the exam. It tells you how many times they passed and collects everything you need to know. You don't have to stalk them.
So for those of you who can afford it, we've had a little mini advertisement over there as one option. Yes.
Good morning. When we are posting our outcomes to our website and to our communities of interest, when it comes to the completion rate, are we required to post the on time, or can we post the ultimate completion rate?
Okay, yes. So for per policy 29, you have to publicize your program completion data, which per ACN standards is on time data, and your pass rate data, if that pass rate applies to you. Obviously, for some RNBs and such, it wouldn't. And it only has to be for the most recent year, which means you have to keep it up to date. If your on-time pass rate is not what you think is something you want to publicize without context, I would highly encourage you to also publicize your ultimate completion rate. That is your data. Let's be honest with the public about what it looks like. What can people expect? And if your on-time completion rate is about 50% and your ultimate completion rate is 65%, that is information that's good to know. I do want to say that is required per policy 29. It is not sufficient enough for some of the criteria that we talked about related to sharing the analysis of the data with your communities of interest, which you're probably doing with maybe your advisory boards or something like that. But actually putting that public data out, I would absolutely be putting my ultimate pass rates out there, especially since so many of them are probably 100%. What a nice advertising for your program to the community. But the requirement is only most recent, on time, most recent, first time. The program completion and pass rate, that's all that's required. Yes, one more time. So what is required for policy 29 is that you publicize your pass rate and your program completion rate. So for program completion rate, it has to be your on time for your most recent year. You can elect to do trending of other years if you like, but your most recent year. Pass rate needs to be your first time pass rate for the most recent year. You can elect to add other information like your ultimate pass rate. You could elect to add other years to show the trend. But what is required minimally, most recent year of your on time completion and your first time pass rate. Any other questions? Well, you made it through Standard 5. Congratulations, you did it. I hope this has been helpful. And now we're going to take a 30-minute break and